Here I'll give you a tour of my basement setup and walk you through all the things that I have here and the reasons why for starting my seeds. So one of the first things I had to do was put a little sheet up, and I got a simple painter sheet and put some tape on the top of it and pinned it to the roof so that it seals off, and that creates its own little climate in my basement. My basement here is only about 16 degrees, but in here I have it between 23 and 25 and about 70% humidity. As you can see, I have some studio lights which are being purposed as a grow light setup for my plants. I have a couple windows here and they do shine directly on the plants, but only limited hours in the day. So I have studio lights set up as supplemental light. My cucumbers were the first to grow, the Katrinas, and they are looking the largest so far. My studio lights I have on a simple timer, and they are running about 12 hours of the day. They go from 8 to 8. I had a simple thermometer hanging up, and I've upgraded to a digital thermometer. I'll show you that in a minute. One of the main things that I found important was humidity. My basement air was way too dry and the plants were struggling with the heat. So raising the humidity has allowed the plants to cope better with the hot temperatures. I have a simple space heater used to heat this little section of my basement. Based on the angle of the sun coming in, there is shady spots. In these shady spots I have some seed starting sections. Once the plants kind of germinate, I move them over. There is a few here that I need to start moving over. Some of my peppers are coming up here. I have these on a heat pad set about 28 degrees. These seeds need heat to germinate. One of the mistakes I made in the beginning was not following close enough instructions for the individual seed requirements. I kind of gave a one size fits all, and that did not work well. Some of the seeds were seeded too deeply and did not germinate, and I was in a bit of a rush to get started seeding, and I was on a time constraint that evening and did it quickly and didn't follow clear enough instructions. And some of these seeds need to be shallowly seeded, and I kind of went with the standard block depth of these foam blocks, and that did not work. So what I ended up doing was actually cutting them down and then seeding them to make sure that the seed did not go too deeply in. Some of these little seeds, they just don't have the energy to actually push through that much vermiculite and make it to sunlight. They need to be shallowly seeded. One of the other important things is temperature for germination. Some of these plants need high temperature, like 28 to 30 degrees, such as some of the peppers and tomatoes, and other plants need cool temperatures. So what I've done is actually I have some on a heat pad. I have some on the table behind here that are not on heat and are in the shade, and then I put some on the floor. Now, because it is a concrete floor, it's quite a bit cooler down there, and once they're germinated, I put them on the table. But this gives me multiple temperature zones within this little basement setup. I'm actually just using a ping pong table as my table. I just covered it with a sheet of plastic. Kind of use what I have to make it work. That is the same with the studio lights. I didn't buy them for grow lights, but I used what I had. There is probably better grow lights, but these seem to be working. It is kind of only temporary, as my plants are going to be outside in a greenhouse where they get natural light. So this is just to get them started in the spring. I found myself really wondering during the day how warm my little greenhouse section here of my basement is. And so I got this Goovy thermometer. It's Wi-Fi enabled, so I can connect this to 2.4 gigahertz, and it's linked to my phone. So while I go to work, I can check up on the basement here and see what the temperature is and monitor the humidity level. This is important because I don't want the basement to overheat or the humidity to drop too low. So I have the humidifier going. I change it twice in a day, put new water in it. And this Goovy hydrometer, which is humidity and temperature in one, is really cool because it graphs all the records of temperature. I will show that in a little insert here from a screenshot from my phone. So before I hung up the plastic all around here, I just had the seeds in containers here. I put lids on them. I actually put the heat pad in the windowsill, but during the day, I believe I actually got this container so hot that it actually sterilized some of the seeds. So I've had to reseed some of the seeds. So it's very important to make sure the temperature is in the right range for germination, but too hot will cause sterilization of the seed. Too cold will cause seeds to stay dormant. So there is a fine line. You really need to follow the instructions on the seed packets, and that way it will prevent you from making some of the mistakes that I made. Really pay attention to the needs of each of the plants, monitoring them for temperature and moisture. I have some of the plants here on the windowsill, my cilantro and my sage. Neither of these really like being really wet, so that's why I've put them in the windowsill to give them full sunlight and out of the water, standing water that I have here on some of my trays. Any plants that don't like to be in standing water, either put them up on the edge. I've actually found these lids really handy because in the beginning I had everything in containers, but that really blocks the sunlight going through the edge. It is clear plastic, but I think it does block it a little bit. So I put it in on the flat surface, and because the whole little section here in my basement is temperature and humidity controlled, they do fine right in the open. It's really important to label all your plants. When you have this much variety of plants, it gets really confusing because all the little plants, they look the same. It's hard to tell from a tiny plant which variety of tomato it is because they just look like a tomato plant. So labeling is so important, and keeping them in sections or rows so that you know which plants are which. Basically what I'm doing is, as the seeds germinate on my heat pad, I am moving them from off the heat pad into this section here and grouping them with their other sister variety. These little foam blocks I was able to cut open and see how the seeds were germinating. Some of the plants that were too deeply seeded, I could notice that when I cut it open, so I actually cut some of them down. Then I just put an elastic around them to hold the block back together. Once the roots have developed, they will hold this little block together, and I will be transplanting this into a larger block. The water that I am feeding my plants is just out of the tap, so it has a bit of chlorine in it. So I leave it for a few days with the lid open, and that lets the chlorine escape. Basically what I want right now is there is no fruit production, so my main thing is giving them the nutrients they need, and later on, once the production of fruit is happening, I will give them a better solution of fertilizer. But there is no nutrients in plain water, and these little foam blocks have no nutrients in them, so it is very important to give them fertilizer water every time you water, not just plain water. So this is my little greenhouse section in my basement. Basically I check it twice a day. It doesn't take a lot of work. Just water it, make sure the humidifier is full, and I monitor it on my phone to make sure that the temperature and the humidity are in the levels I want them at. Just be creative and use what you have, but be aware of the temperature, humidity, the sun, and the light that the plants need, and the specific requirements of each variety that you are growing. Thanks for watching. Subscribe and follow my channel. These plants have a full year of life ahead of them, and I will be documenting that regularly as I build my little greenhouse and plant them in there. Thanks for watching. Goodbye. See you next time.